we can. I want to stress several items at the end. While we support Ukraine's Euro-Atlantic aspirations, and we have sent military equipment through NATO's comprehensive assistance package. And the question we are facing now is how can we help Ukraine not only end the unjust war, but also achieve a just and principled peace. First, as a sovereign nation, only Ukraine can decide for its own future. Second, a just peace must be rooted in the UN Charter principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity. Russia's attempt to acquire territory by force is a flagrant violation of basic tenets. When dangerous precedents go uncontested, they can turn into tolerated practices. Compromises with international law and principles can threaten European and even world peace and security. The only way to avoid this is to respect the UN Charter and the principles of international law without exception. Refraining from the use of force, respect for sovereignty, territorial integrity, and inviolability of borders, and protecting human rights and fundamental freedoms are non-negotiable principles. This last, since unpunished crimes can breed more crime, a just peace should include accountability. While the development of the framework for a future peace agreement is undergoing, we will continue to support a free, independent, democratic, and sovereign Ukraine. My last sentence. I remember the question arisen by Hemingway, for whom the bell tolls. My short answer is, for us, not only as the responsible politicians, but also as human beings. Thank you.
Thank you, President. I'm now pleased to announce the address from Rosemary DiCarlo, Under-Secretary General of the United Nations.
President Ahmed, President Zelensky, the United Nations is pleased to join this meeting as an observer. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has maintained a clear and consistent stance. Russia's invasion of Ukraine violates the United Nations Charter and international law and has caused immense suffering to the people of Ukraine. Further, UN General Assembly resolutions have supported the sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders. Many voices during this meeting have stressed the need to adhere to the principles of the UN Charter. These principles are as valid today as they were in 1945. Excellencies, since the start of the war, the UN has worked with the Ukrainian government and civil society to mitigate the war's impact, particularly on the most vulnerable. This year, thanks to the generosity of donors, we've provided life-saving assistance to 4.4 million people. While the humanitarian needs set to grow due to escalating hostilities, sustained support to the 2024 Ukraine Humanitarian Needs and Response Plan remains essential. The United Nations is also engaged in the areas discussed in detail during this summit: the human dimension, nuclear security, and food security. This summit has served as a valuable opportunity to discuss efforts towards peace, and as such, it can help lay the groundwork for a future process to end this horrific war. At the United Nations, we are ready to support all initiatives toward a just, lasting, and comprehensive peace in Ukraine that are based on the UN Charter, international law, and relevant resolutions of the General Assembly. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. May I hand over the floor to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Mexico, Alicia Barceda.
Thank you very much. I thank President Viola Amherd and Federal Counsel Ignacio Cassis for hosting this important summit. Greetings from President Andrés Manuel López Obrador of Mexico. We come here to exchange ideas on the pathways towards a comprehensive, lasting, and peaceful solution, which we would like to say that this war in Europe is posing an existential security threat, not only for Europe, but for the global community as a whole. It is time then, because we in the Global South are suffering also the consequences related to food security, energy, and of course it is time, we believe, to advocate for peace and not war. Mexico is here to reiterate its long-standing commitment with all the fundamental principles of the UN Charter and the respect for international law and for sovereignty and territorial integrity. We are against violent invasions and aggressions, including diplomatic facilities. Although several peace initiatives have been presented, none seems to have gathered the universal international support needed to be successful. On the contrary, we are seeing an escalation, and more deployment of arms and military equipment at the expense of the suffering of civilians, particularly women and children. Mexico has repeatedly called for the solving of the Russo-Ukrainian conflict through negotiation, mediation, dialogue, and diplomacy, and less armamentism. Mexico has been at the front line in the battle for disarmament and nuclear security. Tlatelolco Treaty is an example of that. We are deeply concerned about the nuclear security and the threats that are emerging in the context of this war. We unequivocally condemn any threat to the use of nuclear weapons under any circumstances, and we call urgently for the preservation of the integrity of the nuclear facilities in Ukraine. The permanent members of the Security Council have an historical responsibility to uphold the UN Charter and to avoid irresponsible actions that endanger peace. All parties involved we are very concerned about the proliferation of weapons in Europe, and we believe that we must avoid that many of these arms are diverted to the illegal market and falls into the hands of non-state actors fueling their criminal acts. Let me tell you that we support four things. Number one, first, it's imperative that we devote diplomatic efforts for the Russian Federation to be included in this discussion. Second, we must bring the peace process under the umbrella of the United Nations. Third, agreements and gradual negotiated steps should be considered to build confidence. And fourth, Mexico is following closely the work of the International Criminal Court entrusted to investigate Russian attacks in Ukraine energy infrastructure. We all agree with me that the world cannot resist the protracted conflict. Finally, we cannot be talking about peace, and here we join South Africa, without mentioning other humanitarian tragedies as the one taking place in Gaza. International law and the UN Charter must be respected in every case, otherwise we will end up in a similar situation than the world was in 1939. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dear Minister. May I now hand over to His All Holiness Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomeus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. War is always destructive. To remain silent in front of the cruelty of war is a shame. It is our duty and mission to defend and promote peace. Blessed are the peacemakers. Your Excellencies, distinguished participants, dear sisters and brothers. It is therefore at once an honor and an obligation to attend this summit on peace in Ukraine, initiated by Her Excellency President Viola Amherd of the Swiss Confederation in partnership with His Excellency President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine. The driving force behind this summit has been the emphasis on and the power of dialogue. Dialogue across all borders of nations and all levels of society, beyond state and political interests, as well as in collaboration with corporate and security concerns. This includes cultural, but above all, religious and spiritual dimensions. This is precisely why, on the 5th of January 2019, in response to the pastoral needs of the Orthodox faithful in Ukraine, the Ecumenical Patriarchate established the Orthodox Church of Ukraine as an autocephalous or self-governing ecclesiastical entity, independent of the Patriarchate of Moscow. And we did this against all odds and at all costs, because we firmly believe that the Orthodox Christians in Ukraine deserve an ecclesiastical voice of their own. We stand here, all of us, in support of a just and lasting peace in a sovereign Ukraine. May God grant rest to all those who have tragically lost their lives and give strength to all those who defend peace. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Your All Holiness. It is my pleasure to hand over to the Secretary of State of the Holy See, His Eminence Cardinal Pietro Parolin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excellencies, dear participants, the Holy See welcomes the convening of this high-level summit on peace for Ukraine, co-hosted by Switzerland and Ukraine. This is an event of global importance, carefully prepared by Ukraine, which, while making enormous efforts to defend itself from aggression, has also worked continuously on the diplomatic front, eager to achieve a just and lasting peace. In the face of war and its tragic consequences, it is important never to give up, but to continue to seek ways to end the conflict with good intentions, trust, and creativity. This is the message Pope Francis conveys, particularly to the rulers of nations, with his ongoing appeals for peace in Ukraine. It is important to reiterate that the only means capable of achieving true, stable and just peace is dialogue between all the parties involved. The Holy See expresses its hope that the diplomatic effort currently being promoted by Ukraine and supported by so many countries will be improved in order to achieve the result that the victims deserve and that the entire world is hoping for. In accordance with its nature, the Holy See is participating as an observer, paying particular attention to the respect for international law and humanitarian issues. With regard to the first aspect, it wishes to reaffirm the validity of the fundamental principle of respect for the sovereignty of each country and for the integrity of its territory. The ODC expresses great concern from the tragic humanitarian consequences and is especially committed to facilitating the repatriation of children and encouraging the release of prisoners, especially seriously wounded soldiers and civilians. The reunification of minors with their families or legal guardians must be a paramount concern for all parties, and any exploitation of their situation is unacceptable. It is therefore imperative that every available channel is strengthened to facilitate this process. In addition, the ODC participates as an observer in the work of the International Coalition for the Repatriation of Ukrainian Children from Russia. Furthermore, it maintains direct contact with both the Ukrainian and Russian authorities with the aim of enhancing the effectiveness of the ad hoc mechanism created following the visit of Cardinal Matteo Zuppi to Kiev and Moscow with a view to resolving concrete cases. With regard to prisoners, both civilian and military, there is a great concern over the periodic reports of non-compliance with the Geneva Conventions, in particular about the Fourth Convention, which most directly concerns civilians, and the difficulty of creating, together with the International Red Cross Committee, a joint medical commission that could assess the situation of prisoners of war in need of urgent medical care. Despite of all challenges, the Holy See remains committed to maintaining regular communication with the Ukrainian and Russian authorities and remains prepared to assist in the implementation of potential mediation initiatives that are acceptable to all parties and benefit those who have been affected. At the same time, the Holy See encourages countries and other members of the international community to explore ways of providing assistance and facilitating mediation, whether of humanitarian or political nature. We trust that by supporting these efforts, we can help us find consensus and ensure the timely implementation of these projects. On behalf of Pope Francis, I wish to confirm his personal closeness to the tormented Ukrainian people and his unwavering commitment to peace. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Your Eminence. I am now pleased to invite the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Slovak Republic, Juraj Blanar, to give his address.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, dear Excellencies, dear participants. First of all, I would like to commend and thanks to our Swiss colleague for hosting this important event. Our Prime Minister, Robert Fico, who was supposed to be here today, is not present because of terrible assassination attempt a month ago. So let me convey his personal regards to all participants as he is closely watching the outcomes. Today I would like to deliver 3 key points. Firstly, war against Ukraine is raging on European soil, but it has a far-reaching global implication. No viable solution is thus possible without the global players engaged constructively in the name of UN-centered international law and order. Adherence of international law is crucial importance for maintaining peace all around the globe. For such a small country like Slovakia is especially important. Secondly, the key principles defined by the UN Charters and the Helsinki Final Act are indispensable and must be integrated into the political platform like this, driving the peace efforts toward the more concrete future peace plan tabled when conditions are ripe. In the meantime, critical issues like protection of civilians, exchange of war prisoners, return of hostages, freedom of navigation, nuclear safety etc., need to be efficiently addressed. Slovakia is especially deeply concerned with the security of the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant and fully support the IAEA's effort to implement basic security safeguards and to monitor its operations. To this end, the Slovak government has supported IAEA work with the financial means. Thirdly, Ukraine must survive to become peaceful, independent, sovereign and democratic country with stable, internationally recognized borders and firmly on its path towards the European Union membership. To join Slovak-Ukrainian government session held in this year have confirmed that and produce the roadmap focusing on strategic infrastructure and connectivity, for instance, to help Ukraine with the more and more frequent power outages. Slovakia continues to provide large volume of electricity. Since April 2024, more than 40,000 megawatt hours have been delivered, and we will stand ready to provide more. Ladies and gentlemen, Their Excellencies, Slovakia is around this table because we want to support every peace initiatives, but it is necessary to have all stakeholders involved in the process. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Minister. May I now hand over to the National Security Advisor of the United States of America, Jake Sullivan.
President Amherd, President Zelensky, thank you for hosting this summit, and more than that, congratulations on a tremendous success in this summit. You have gathered 100 countries and institutions from all parts of the world, all regions, representing people from everywhere, and showing that there is broad and deep support for a just peace. More than that, though, what this summit has done is define what the core character, the core foundation of that just peace looks like. And that is the principles of the United Nations Charter, the principles of international law, the notion of sovereignty and territorial integrity, and the basic proposition that no nation should be allowed to conquer another nation by force, period. And that has created a platform upon which Ukraine can stand going forward to negotiate from a position of confidence to secure its sovereignty and territorial integrity and to secure the just peace that the people of Ukraine deserve. And even beyond that, the working groups today gave momentum to the practical steps that we all need to take together on food security, nuclear security, and of course the return of abducted children and the monstrous act of abducting those children, taking them from their homes and families must be rectified, and those children must be returned. What is most interesting in watching these last 2 days is the split screen of this weekend with what we heard from President Putin as he laid out his vision for peace a couple of days ago, where he said, not only does Ukraine have to give up the territory Russia currently occupies, but Ukraine has to leave additional sovereign Ukrainian territory before Russia will negotiate. And Ukraine must disarm so that it is vulnerable to future Russian aggression down the road. No responsible nation can say that is a reasonable basis for peace. It defies the UN Charter, it defies basic morality, it defies basic common sense. By contrast, the vision of peace that was put forward here today from so many different countries, rooted in principles all of us signed up to, rooted in principles all of us would like to live in a world that are ruled by those principles because they make us all safe. This is the right vision as we go forward. And so this summit, from our perspective, is a critical milestone on a path towards a just peace, and the United States of America will proudly walk with Ukraine along that path until Ukraine prevails and peace prevails. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I now give over the floor to Mr. Luis Almagro, Secretary General of the Organization of American States.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here and participate in the summit on peace for Ukraine. I thank the Swiss government for this invitation. I fully agree with the fundamental premises of this meeting. Ethically, we shall always support attempts for peace. Peace is an ethical project, and we shouldn't have any dilemma about it. No moral dilemma about freedom, or about sovereignty, or about territorial integrity or self-determination, or about condemnation of aggression. No moral dilemma about working for peace. No moral dilemma about human rights violations or crimes against humanity. It's about principles, and it's about survival. It is about our work in order to preserve the rule of law internationally. The law of the strongest cannot be accepted. The peace always has to be just. Russia is a great country with a great history, great culture. Tolstoy, Solzhenitsyn, Sakharov, Marina, Tsvetaeva. So Russia, to honor their greatness, has to stop sucking the blood of this war. It has been already enough for the whole world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I now give the floor to the Prime Minister of Cabo Verde, José Ulises Correia e Silva.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excellencies, this summit is a timely initiative. It's timely because it's always important to seek best paths to peace. Cabo Verde firmly supports the international order based on the UN Charter and international law. Cabo Verde defends respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of states. It's based on these principles that from the outset we condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And we maintain our position consistently. This war caused death and destruction. This war is a threat to global security and the stability of the world economy. The least developed countries are those that suffer most from the impacts of the global economic and food security crisis. The escalation of inflation and the disruption of food supply chains caused by the war are examples of these impacts. The breakdown of the Partnership for Development caused by the war effort is another impact that could worsen. Therefore, the war in Ukraine is not indifferent to any country in the world. Due to the values at stake and the consequence of the war, it is important to fight for peace. We hope that this summit will be a strong step towards a lasting and just peace. Together, we are stronger. Thank you. God bless.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I'm now pleased to invite the President of Latvia, Edgar Rinkēvičs, to take the floor.
Thank you very much, and first of all, thank you, Switzerland and Ukraine, for all the hard work you have done to convene this summit. I do believe that this is the first step in a very long way towards the peace, but I think that the spirit that we have heard and seen yesterday and today is the right one. I do believe also that we as the international community must work out a comprehensive roadmap to the peace, but at least two elements are critical here. First, Russia must withdraw all its armed forces from Ukrainians' territory, and Ukraine's territorial integrity must be restored within its internationally recognized borders. We have discussed a lot about the food security, nuclear safety, humanitarian aspects of the Russian aggression against Ukraine. I think that those three elements actually affect all of us, and I do believe that it is our responsibility to address them in the most serious way. I had my own experience being in Ukraine when the war started on 21st of February 2022, I saw the horror of the first hours. I saw people fleeing, and I think that those memories will be with me throughout the whole life. But I also believe that we are seeing, and many of colleagues have mentioned here, children who have been abducted by Russian Federation, the children who, when they visit our countries, when they have a couple of nights without air alerts, without bombing or drones overflying, they are regaining their childhood. And I think that it is very important that we continue, while we are talking about the peace, addressing the real issues also on humanitarian side. Also, one thing that I want to particularly mention is I'm coming from the country, Latvia, that has history of the Soviet occupation and colonialism. What we see in Ukraine today is what many of countries here present have seen also in the past. Russia is the country that is launching colonial war, and I think that it is also very important that we look at this war from this aspect. Finally, I do believe that we need to work further, and this summit is the first step when now we have the world's community's support to work out the comprehensive roadmap and to continue in the very good spirit that we have seen all here also in the future. Thank you.
Mr. President, thank you so much. And finally, it's my pleasure to hand over the floor to the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau.
President Umbert, President Zelensky, thank you for asking Canada to close these interventions from the floor. And thank you for bringing us all together for this important and successful summit. It is a summit on peace in Ukraine, but it is not just about Ukraine. It is about whether or not the global community will stand up for international law and the rules-based order that protects us all. Canada will always be a strong voice for democracy, freedom and peace, and standing up for international law and the rules-based order. This is why we keep supporting Ukraine. Our work all together during this summit has helped shape a joint vision of a peace framework based on the UN Charter and international law. We will continue to uphold the fundamental principles embedded in the UN Charter. Before coming to Switzerland, I was in Italy for the G7, where we took significant actions to keep supporting Ukraine, primarily with the major G7 loans to help pay for the damage caused by Russia. When a just and sustainable peace comes, we will all be there to help Ukraine rebuild. What's good about buildings is that they can be rebuilt. But the people who lost their lives, the families destroyed, they won't be able to bring them back. That's the most painful consequence of war, the human suffering. As Volodymyr pointed out last night, today in many, many countries around the world, it's Father's Day. This evening, many of us will be home with our kids. Not everyone is so lucky. Ukraine, thousands of kids have been taken from their families, their home, their communities. Ukraine says that close to 20,000 children were taken by Russia. We've recently seen reports of Ukrainian children being listed on Russian adoption websites. They're being forced to forget their identity as Ukrainians. I think we all know the consequence of removing children from their language, their culture, their families, their identity. It's a form of colonialism that the world cannot abide by. Earlier today, I co-chaired a working session on the human dimension of this war to work towards bringing kids home to their families. And Canada's announcing $15 million in funding to support the reintegration of displaced children returning to Ukraine through improved child protection services and family-based care options. Ukrainian kids belong in their schools, their playgrounds, and their communities. This funding will also improve access to justice for survivors of war crimes, among other measures. This illegal war by Russia needs to end. Humanitarian law and the UN Charter must be respected. We have to keep sending strong signals that our solidarity with Ukraine is as strong as ever and will not fade. Russian aggression has to stop. It won't be easy, but as a dad, I hope that we can all get to a just and sustainable peace in the next year so that Ukrainian kids and families can celebrate Father's Day together, but also that people and families everywhere around the world are able to know that international law and the rules-based order will be defended and upheld by all countries in the world. This is how we protect each other. This is how we protect future generations. This is how we keep the world on the right track. Slava Ukraini, Heroyam Slava, glory to Ukraine, glory to its heroes.